Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in just a moment. All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Put Your Money Where Your Market Is, How to Market Your Firm to Maximize ROI. This session has been sponsored by Gravity Legal, so if you like it, go ahead and pop into their booth, say hi to them. As you should know by now, because come on, man, it's been 3 days. I am Bree Van Til. I'm the Director of Education at Alt Legal. I'm also your Master of Ceremonies. I'm here to make sure that you have a wonderful time and that you learn a ton of things, including from this session. If you do have any feedback for us about the conference, about this session, about anything, please go ahead and put that in the second tab in the Connect 2021 feedback form. We would love to hear it. All right. As a reminder, code of conduct, pay attention to it. Don't be a jerk because I don't want to have to ask you to leave. Come on. We've only got 3 hours left. Anyway, please note that we are not offering CLE credit for this session. However, we will still provide a uniform certificate of attendance, and we do absolutely still want your feedback about the session. The requirements are still the same, whether it is for CLE credit or not. First of all, you must be here in person. Well, whatever, virtually in person, live, not via recording. I'm going to need you to be here for 70 minutes. And I want you to write down the code that I give you. Don't try to memorize it, just write it down. And I will send you a survey at the end of the session. Make sure to put the code in that survey and submit the survey. All right, again, Alt Legal is still a legal technology company, not a law firm. We're not going to give you any legal advice. And this upcoming presentation expresses the views of the presenter. They may or may not be the same as Alt Legal's views. Definitely continue to use the chat. We absolutely love that. It's my favorite part about this kind of conference. But if you have a question for Tasneem, make sure to put question in front of that so that it's easy for us to spot that. All right, I am excited to welcome our speaker, Tasneem Kkokha. Tasneem is the managing director of GrowthPlay, a marketing consultation company. She previously worked as the director of marketing at Cat and Munchin, and back in the day, she was an attorney, so she feels your pain. She's practiced at Latham and Watkins and at Kirkland and Ellis. Super impressive. So she understands what it's like both as a lawyer and a marketer. She's here to help you. Here is Tasneem.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Bree. Well, hey, gang, it's great to see you, and I am delighted to be with you all. I'm going to get my slides up, and here we go. So I am thrilled to be with you all today to talk about this subject of how to get the most out of your marketing and business development efforts. In my years of practicing law, and since then, as my years as an executive within law firms, heading marketing and business development, as well as a consultant, consulting to firms who are trying to grow their firms through marketing and various marketing and business development initiatives. I've seen a lot of places where marketing and business development goes wrong. And in particular, as it relates to marketing, I've seen lots and lots of law firm leaders, attorneys be frustrated that they don't seem to see the return on investment that they want from their marketing dollars. And so that really is the impetus for today's presentation. My hope is that in the course of our conversation, you will get some guidance on how to evaluate marketing and business development opportunities to figure out whether they're a fit with your business objectives, and then how to execute and follow through on them in a way that gets you the best ROI. And so that's how I designed today's session and set our objectives. Number one, I'm going to talk about how to evaluate marketing opportunities and create a plan that aligns with your business objectives. Then secondly, we'll talk about actually executing those marketing efforts in a way that creates business opportunity. And then last but not least, we'll talk about follow-up. Just like your golf swing or your baseball swing, follow-up is an incredibly important part of marketing and business development. So we'll talk about how it is that you see those opportunities and those efforts through to the end in a way that creates the new business opportunities that you're looking for. So with all of that said, I wanted to level set about the process of business development, because at the end of the day, marketing doesn't exist for marketing's sake, right? When you all place advertisements, sponsor conferences or events, attend networking events, take people to lunch, host events, you name it. When you do any of those things, when you attend conferences like this, right? A big part of the purpose for that is not just to raise your profile, which is what we think of as marketing activity, but also to develop new business, to actually bring new business in the door of your firms. And so one of the things that I thought we would start our conversation with is just a level set on what is that process of business development? What does it look like? And where does marketing fit into it? So by and large, when we think about the process of business development, you'll see here sort of a time orientation from left to right. It starts with meeting a good fit client or potential client, a good fit prospect. That is the place where marketing has its most valuable contribution, because that is the place where we spend dollars, whether that's through advertising or sponsorships or attendance at conferences or hosting events or publishing articles, you name it. We spend those dollars and we put that effort in order to get us in front of the right audiences. That's where we're going to spend most of our time today. We then move from getting in front of the right audiences, having access to the right people, whether that's in-house counsel or heads of R&D or CEOs or founders or executives, you name it. We then move from that aspect of meeting prospects to building relationships. You all, as trademark attorneys, are in a relationship-driven business. You know that your clients hire you because they know you and they like you and they trust you. You're typically not in the kinds of firms that get hired because somebody sees your firm on a billboard or on a bus stop, right? People are going to hire you because they get to know you and they think that you're smart and capable and they like you, they trust you, they want to do business with you. And so that building of relationships is a critical part of business development. That's really the handoff between marketing and business development, and we'll talk a lot about that today as well. Then the process continues to identifying a transition. By and large, I would imagine that when you all are meeting new clients, some of them may not have existing legal counsel, right? Some of them may be startup companies or other businesses where they don't already have existing legal counsel. But I would imagine that many of the prospects that you meet already have existing counsel, right? If not just one lawyer or law firm that they're working with, maybe even a stable of lawyers and law firms that they're working with. And so then you've got to sort of hang out and wait for or create the transition where your legal services become relevant or necessary. Otherwise, you're trying to sell to someone who's not buying. So this is a key part of the process. We will talk less about this process. I'll mention it as we talk about relationship building, but this is really where we shift from marketing to business development. How is it that we take that awareness that we've created and those relationships that we've created and then turn them into business opportunity? Ultimately, then the business development opportunity or business development process continues with holding sales conversations, the pitches or whatever formal or informal conversations you have with clients about working together, and ultimately, hopefully, of course, the objective is closing the work. Today, we're going to talk about, as I mentioned, those first couple of buckets, the meeting of prospects, how do we get in front of the right audiences of buyers of legal services, and then how do we translate those opportunities to get in front of those audiences into opportunities to build relationships. So let's dive into it. The first thing I want to talk about is how do you evaluate opportunities? One of the many things that I've seen over the course of my last couple of decades in this industry is that when it comes to marketing opportunities for lawyers, they abound, right? There are lots and lots of opportunities for you all to market. Everything from places to advertise, whether that's in publications like Law 360 or IP Law 360, or at conferences like like INTA or others. There's lots of things to do. There's lots of sponsorships to be bought. You can sponsor a business journal event. You can sponsor an event at INTA or whatever. There's lots and lots of ways that you can market, and yet figuring out which opportunities are right for you, which opportunities align best with your business objectives, can be really, really difficult. So the first thing that I want you all to think about when you're evaluating marketing opportunities is this. It's what we call target market analysis. The essential question is, will this opportunity get me in front of my target market? In other words, will this opportunity get me in front of the clients, potential clients, or referral sources that are going to actually create business opportunity for me? That alignment with audience is a critical part and always the very first question that you want to ask yourself. Every good marketing or business development campaign starts with the question of who. Who am I trying to get in front of? So when you're evaluating an opportunity, whether it's an advertisement, a sponsorship, publishing an article, giving a presentation, you name it, the first thing I want you to ask yourself is, what audience is this going to get me in front of? And is that the audience that can create business opportunity for me? Is that the audience that can either sign on the dotted line and hire me, sign an engagement letter, or is that the audience that can connect me with people who want to buy from me? So many of you will define your target market in lots of different ways. Some of you have a very specific industry focus, right? You may apply your trademark practice specifically in the fashion and luxury brands industries. And so you might take an industry vertical approach to that and say, okay, how do I get myself in front of audiences of in-house counsel or executives who are working in the fashion or luxury brands industries? Some of you may look to specific business types or sizes, right? You might say, I'm looking for privately held companies, or I'm looking for publicly traded companies. I'm looking for companies with a revenue size, size of a certain number, or whatever it might be. Others of you may be looking for people with a particular job title or job function, right? So some of you may be saying, I'm looking for the general counsel or the in-house counsel who is responsible for intellectual property, or I'm looking for a founders of companies. I'm looking for startup founders and I want to serve them in their trademark needs, right? Those kinds of things. Some of you may be looking at it from geography. I specifically am looking for clients who are in my geographic market. However you define those target markets, and you may have combinations of these, right? You may say, I'm interested in the fashion industry in New York, whatever it might be. But that initial analysis of, is this the right audience? Are the people who are going to see this, attend this, participate in this, consume this, read this, whatever, is that the audience that I want to get in front of? So that's the first question that I want to ask you. That I want you to ask yourself. If the answer is yes, then I want you to look for opportunities to do one of these four things or multiple of these four things. So one thing that you might be trying to do is simply learn, right? You might be trying to understand, what are the issues that are happening in this particular target market? What do executives in the fashion industry care most about? What do in-house counsel in the apparel industry care most about as it relates to issues of trademarks and brand protection and things like that? So one of the things that you might be trying to do is just get a sense of, what do the people in this audience, what do the people and organizations in this audience care most about, as a way that allows you to then say, okay, how do I draw the line back to me, right? If I know what this audience cares most about, now I can start to think about, what do I bring to the table that's valuable to that audience? So that's one thing. A second thing that we're typically trying to do with marketing is be seen, right? We want to raise our profile and our visibility with the right people and organizations. So one of the things that we want to think about is, what opportunity does this marketing effort give me to be seen by the right people and organizations? Am I going to get, if I'm going to get an article published on a blog or on a website, who's looking at that, right? How many people are visiting that website? Who is their readership? All of those kinds of things. A third thing that we're sometimes trying to do is contribute in terms of thought leadership, right? So one of the things that we're often trying to do as lawyers trying to get ourselves out there in the markets that we're trying to serve is show our expertise. So are you going to be able to present or provide content or publish or write or in some other way, right, edit a chapter, you name it? Are you able to do something that is going to show off your capabilities or expertise in a way that's valuable and gets you exposure to the audience that you're trying to get in front of and shows them that you really know your stuff? And then last but not least, a big part of what we're often trying to do with marketing opportunities is actually connect with the people who make the decisions, or the people who can connect us with the people who make the decisions. So this is true of this is just as true of events like conferences and networking events and those kinds of things that you might sponsor or attend or be a part of. It's also true, though, of presentations and articles and things like that. I know most of us, when we think we're going to present at a conference, or we're going to give a CLE presentation at a bar association or a trade association, or we're going to publish an article or things like that, typically we think of that as a one-way thing, right? I'm going to put this stuff out there and then hope that something good comes from that. And that being said, I would ask you all to think to yourselves, how many times have you written an article or given a presentation, and now all of a sudden the phone is ringing off the hook with people saying, oh my gosh, I just read your article. You are the most brilliant trademark lawyer I've ever encountered, and I must have you as my outside counsel, right? It just doesn't happen that way. And so one of the things that we want to think about is, how can we transform these marketing opportunities into actual opportunities to connect with people and build the kinds of relationships that, again, lead to that knowing, liking, and trusting that actually create business opportunity. And we'll talk a little bit more about how you actually translate those opportunities in a moment. But that's a big part of this, is how do we connect with the right kinds of people? Phil has a great comment about targeting cuts out a lot of wasted time and effort. Phil, that is absolutely correct. So one of the reasons that I encourage you all and all of my clients to start by evaluating marketing and business development opportunities with, am I getting right in front of the right audience, is because if you're not, then don't waste your time, right? So important. If you're not getting in front of the right audience, don't be there. Right? It's not worth your time and energy, nor is it worth your valuable advertising or sponsorship or whatever dollars. So this is really, really important. And James, to your point, narrowing it down is really important, right? So a big part, one of the things that I often see with people when it comes to defining target audiences, many of us think, if I cast a wide net, I'll catch more fish, right? This idea that if I make myself available and appealing to as many people as possible, then I'm more likely to get the business that I'm looking for. But the reality of that is that oftentimes if you cast too wide a net, it's a little bit like trying to be all things to all people, where you end up being nobody in particular to no one in particular, right? It gets very difficult to build any momentum or traction with any given audience. So one of the things that disciplined marketers and the most successful rainmakers that I've seen do is be very focused on what is the target market, or what are the target markets that they are focused on. So Sharon, to your point, it's absolutely fine to have multiple target markets, right? If you've got 2 target markets, that's great. If you've defined them well with specificity and you know exactly who you're looking for, it's perfectly fine to have multiple target markets. But the key part of it is, do you know exactly who your target market is? I'm not saying you have to define your target market of 2 companies, 3 companies, right? But do you have a nice narrow target market that allows you to say, okay, where do I go to meet the right people and organizations, and how do I build momentum and traction there? I suspect that those of you who have invested in marketing and business development efforts have in part found that repetition and sort of consistent impressions on the same audience is really, really important. It's the same reason why when you watch a 3-hour football game, you watch you see 19 Geico commercials, and by the 7th one, you're like, did I see a caveman? Part of that is because it takes a while for the message to sink in, right? So one of the things that we have to do in our own marketing and business development, we got to show up in front of the same people and get to know the same audiences multiple times. And part of and focusing on specific target markets helps us with that. All right, so let's forge ahead. Once you've evaluated those opportunities, you've thought about, is this getting me in front of my target market? And am I going to have the opportunity to learn, be seen, contribute, or connect? Then I want you to think about, okay, then if I'm going to go forward, how do I do that in the best way possible? So one of the things that I want to expose you all to is our marketing roadmap. So one of the things that we use this marketing roadmap for is to get people thinking about how do the various things that you might invest in for marketing and business development purposes connect with one another. So you'll see in the top left quadrant that prospects and connectors is the biggest box here, because at the end of the day, the most valuable business development and marketing activity that you can have is an activity that creates interactions with the people who can either buy from you or refer to you. That's why we put that prospect and connectors box in bold. I call that the golden quadrant. If all of your marketing and business development activity is spent interacting with prospects and connectors, that is awesome. Most of us, however, do things in the other three boxes as a way to feed activity with prospects and connectors. So, for example, we attend events like this, we sponsor conferences, we host events, we participate in industry or bar associations, all of those kinds of things, that bottom left quadrant. All of those things that we do, we want to do them for the purpose of either getting us in front of new prospects and connectors, or getting us further in front of prospects and connectors we already know, right? So giving us new opportunities to get in front of our existing prospects and connectors. So one of the things that we want to think about with events and associations is that activity actually giving us the opportunity to connect with prospects and connectors? But top right quadrant, alliance and team marketing. This is all of the things that you do in partnership with other lawyers or other firms. So the idea that, maybe you're co-hosting something with a litigation funding firm. Maybe you're co-hosting something with another firm. Maybe you're co-authoring an article with a valuation expert or somebody like that. Again, the idea here is, does that help you get in front of new prospects and connectors, or make you more interesting to existing prospects and connectors? So the idea here is, okay, would my partnership with someone either inside of my firm or outside of my firm, would that make each of us more attractive together than we would be separately to prospects and connectors? So that's the question there with alliance and team marketing is this going to make me more interesting to my target audience? And then on the bottom right quadrant, that's content and influence. This is all of the stuff that you do: writing articles, publishing, giving presentations, speaking, being on panels, advertising, all of those kinds of things, social media, you name it. It's all of the things that we do to sort of get ourselves out there in terms of content and influence. And again, the idea here is that giving you the opportunity to go back to the top left quadrant, the golden quadrant? Is it giving you the opportunity to get in front of your prospects and connectors? Joan asked a good question about existing clients. So one of the things that I like to point out to people, I've made a lot of hay just in the last few minutes about prospects and connectors. The whole point of marketing is to get in front of your prospects and connectors. In my opinion, some of your best prospects are your existing clients, right? So any given prospects are not just net new clients that you're looking for. Some of your best prospects are your existing clients, right? The data shows that some of the data shows that it's 10 times easier to get new business from an existing client than it is to land a net new client. Now, that's not to say that for most of us, we can't just focus on growing existing clients, because there's usually some level of natural kind of attrition or a static nature to that. And so most of us need some kind of steady stream of new clients also coming into the mix. But as it relates to where you spend your marketing and business development resources, energy, and dollars, my recommendation would be that you spend at least a third, if not a half to 2/3 of your resources, whether that's time, energy, dollars, you name it, marketing to your existing clients versus to net new clients. So if you've got a half and half split, that's usually a healthy mix. Even if you've got a 1/3 to 2/3 mix, that's a healthy mix. But you should absolutely, Joan, to your question, absolutely be focusing on existing client relationships and bolstering those. And that can take lots of different forms, right? So it might not be advertising, but certainly publishing articles. But then here's the thing, right? You publish an article, you don't just want to wait for your client to hopefully see it. I want you to actually take that article, PDF it or whatever it is that you have to do, send it to your client and say, hey, Stacy, I just published an article on XYZ trademark issue that I know you all are facing. I thought this would be a valuable resource to you. And if you'd like to talk more about it, let's get on the phone or let's get on Zoom and let's discuss how you all are navigating these issues, right? So when it comes to existing clients, it's that kind of personal touch that we've got to do. Same thing that applies with articles. It applies with presentations. Again, hey, Stacy, beloved client, I'm presenting at the Alt Legal Connect conference, and I think there's not only my presentation, but the full agenda might be really valuable and interesting to you. You may want to check it out, right? That kind of thing. So giving people those specific, right, making those personal touches with existing clients to say, hey, I'm investing in this, and I thought it might be valuable to you. I'd love to give you. I'd love to expose it to you. But by and large, I want you to be really thinking about prospects and connectors, right? So prospects, including existing clients, those are the people who can actually buy from us, the people who sign engagement letters or pay invoices. And then connectors are the people who connect us with those prospects. So one of the big things that we want to do, I know most of us get most excited about prospects, right? The people who actually sign the checks. And that being said, a well-placed connector can be just as valuable as a prospective client. In fact, sometimes even better than any one prospective clients, because a well-placed connector, a well-placed referral source might be the doorway to multiple different prospective clients if they're doing their job right. So for a lot of you, if you're working with valuation experts or marketing or advertising agencies or firms and things like that, some of those people, to Kimberly's point, some of those people are, or sorry, not Kimberly's point, it was Phil. This idea of how do we partner with people who offer a different service than we have, but are looking for the same audience, right? So for many of you, the advertising agencies, the marketing companies, the valuation experts, a lot of those people are looking for the same target audience for you, but they offer something different, and those can be nice marketing and business development partners. So when it comes to connectors, I really want you to pay attention to those relationships just as much as prospects, in part because a well-placed connector who's really doing their job well can be the doorway to multiple different prospects and potential clients. All right, so here are just a handful of best practices that I want you all to keep in mind around that marketing roadmap. So the first one in that bottom left quadrant, I had talked about events and associations. First and foremost, the thing that I want you to keep in mind with events and associations is, does it match my target audience, right? Am I getting in front of the right audience? We've talked about that. Once you do that, though, then I want you to think about a couple of other things. Number two, I want you to check for authentic affiliation with the organization. In other words, I want you to make sure that, in fact, you are there for the right purposes. Because here's the thing, when you go to an industry organization or a professional association or charitable association, when you participate in any of those kinds of events and associations, and your only purpose is to shill for business, that becomes pretty transparent. It usually starts to turn people off. If you're going to participate in a bar association or an industry association, care about the purpose for which that organization exists. When you do that, then you'll have a really great opportunity to build the kinds of authentic relationships that ultimately lead to business opportunity. So in addition to that, one of the things that, if you're doing events and associations, one of the things that's great to do is get into the leadership ranks. So if you're participating in an organization like INTA or something like that, it's great to go to the annual conference every year or attend the monthly questions or things like that. But one of the things that I really want you to be thinking about is, can you volunteer for a leadership position? Can you work your way onto the committees or the boards and things like that? It typically is that kind of participation beyond just showing up that, again, raises your profile with the right kinds of people and allows you to build the relationships that ultimately lead to business opportunity. Okay, alliances and teaming. One of the things that I want you all to think about, I see over and over again, way too many lawyers going to lunch, right? A trademark lawyer going to lunch with an advertising firm executive and talking about how can we collaborate. But oftentimes I see those lunches ultimately devolve into how's things going, how's business, those kinds of things. But we don't actually talk about who are you getting in front of these days? What kinds of things are you helping them with? And how can we be helpful to each other? So one of the things that I want you to pay attention to in those alliance and team marketing is, can you offer those people ways that you can be helpful to them, right? Being helpful to the other person. Hey, would it be valuable for you to come with me to this networking event? I think it might be a great opportunity for us to get in front of the kinds of clients that we're often looking to get in front of, those kinds of things. Or give them reasons to introduce you, right? So saying to your friend at an advertising agency, hey, there's some changes in the trademark laws, and one of the things that you may want to think about is how you keep your clients up to date to that. If it would be helpful to you, I'd be happy to come in and do a program for your clients on my dime and on my time, those kinds of things. Last thing, with respect to content and influence, probably the biggest thing here that I want you to think about is this idea of 3-to-1 leverage. So when I say 3-to-1 leverage, what I mean by that is, if you're going to write an article, can you turn that article also into a series of blog posts or also into a presentation in a way that allows you to take the same content and research that you've done and put it on multiple channels or multiple platforms or in multiple ways. When you can do that, when you can create that multiple points of leverage, you're taking you all spend a ton of time researching those presentations, those articles, all of those kinds of things. I know your time is incredibly precious. So if you're going to invest that time, let's figure out how we can get multiple uses out of it. Let's figure out how we can get as much mileage as we can. So one of the things that I want you to be thinking about is, can you turn the presentation also into a blog post? Can you not only self-publish it and send it out to your client list, but also potentially get it published in IP Law 360 or something like that, right? So where you can get multiple points of leverage for any given piece that you put together, that's making the most of your time and energy. One of the things somebody asked about client gifts. So and there were some comments about watching out for rules and things like that. It's absolutely true. There are lots of both professional conduct rules that you all probably need to pay attention to, as well as client specific, right? Specific client relationship, client organizations, like a lot of the financial institutions or insurance institutions and otherwise have rules about not taking gifts from vendors and things like that. And that being said, the thing that I will tell you all about showing gratitude, whether it's to clients or to referral sources, is my experience has been that the gifts or the expressions of gratitude that are most meaningful to people are not the most expensive bottle of wine or the most hard to come by tickets at a concert or a show or something like that. Oftentimes I find that when you can offer an expression of gratitude that is tailored to the specific person that you are trying to thank and plays on something that they care about, that's one of the best gifts that you can give, right? So I've seen lots of my clients, law firms and lawyers, have great success with things like charitable donations in honor of a client, or a small, or even just a meaningfully, thoughtfully handwritten card that you send in the mail. A lot of those kinds of things are the kinds of things that really get people's attention and pull at their heartstrings in a way that advances those relationships, in a way that that doesn't necessarily run afoul of those kinds of rules, and frankly doesn't cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars. It's really just that idea of how can I make a meaningful gesture that this person will appreciate. So one of the things that I would encourage you all to be thinking about when you're thinking about gratitude, whether it's to clients or to referral sources, is what's the gesture that you can make that's going to be meaningful to the person. All right, let's forge ahead. I saw a question about developing remote relationships from Brian. So Brian, this is a tough one. I think, all of us over the past year and a half in the pandemic have really struggled in many ways with marketing and business development, largely because a lot of the typical things that we've often relied on for marketing and business development, whether it's lunches or coffees or drinks or dinners or conferences or networking events or things like that. A lot of that stuff has been out of the picture, right? And now it looks like that's uncertain again. I will tell you that that my experience of this has changed over the course of the pandemic. So I suspect that many of you probably saw that in the first part of the pandemic, there was a lot of excitement about, hey, let's do a Zoom happy hour, or hey, let's do a Zoom, an event on Zoom or virtual wine tasting or those kinds of things. I don't know about you all, but my experience has been that people's appetite for those kinds of things has waned a lot, especially as the pandemic has worn on. And so one of the things that I would recommend that you all do as it relates to connecting with clients and potential clients, despite the fact that we still can't do a lot of the in-person stuff that we used to, is go old school on it. I would say, number one, pick up the phone. I read a recent survey that said only 21% of clients report that their outside counsel had recently called them just to check in and see how things are going. That means that if you pick up your phone and call one of your clients, you're out behaving 79% of the competition. Yay on you, right? Pick up the phone, just call them. Hey, how's it going? It's been a long time since we've talked. I'd love to connect. Can you believe the summer is already over? And here we are barreling into the fall, whatever it might be, those kinds of things. Again, when it comes to articles or presentations or things like that you're giving, make that extra effort to reach out to existing contacts of yours and say, hey, Phil, I just published this piece on recent trademark developments that I thought would be valuable to you because I know this issue is one that's come up in your company. If you'd like to talk about it, let me know. Let's set up a time to talk, those kinds of things. So it's those kinds of often old school, in the trenches, man-to-man contact that we've got to be a little bit creative with. I think, I've seen a lot of people do small things like send little gifts, right? Even just some of you may have seen the THNKS Thanks app. It's thanks without the A. The Thanks app is a little way that you can choose from a number of different sort of gifts that you can send to someone. Some of them are just like a Starbucks gift card or something like that. So you can through the Thanks app, send that to somebody. All they need, they don't have to have the app. All they need is you need their email or their text. They open up a link and they get your gift. So that can be a nice way to connect with people too. But I would say, to Joan's point, novel but so true. Yes, go old school. Pick up the phone and call, or send an email or a text or whatever. The one thing that I would recommend above all else is don't just stop and wait. Do not wait for the pandemic to be over, because here we are 18 or whatever months into it. And if you've spent the last 18 months waiting for things to open back up, you've lost 18 months of connection with your clients and your potential clients. And I guarantee you other people who are your competitors are finding ways to go around it. So what I will tell you is, as we move into this second phase here of the pandemic, here we are with the Delta variant and all of that. And many of us thought we were going back to the offices and going back to life as usual, starting in the fall. And maybe now we're not going to, who knows? But my biggest recommendation to you all is don't wait, right? Don't let the fact that we can't do all of the in-person things that we thought we were going to be able to do keep you from reaching out, and whether it's by phone, text, email, you name it, getting in touch with your clients, your potential clients, your referral sources, and being present with them, because it's a big part of what we need to be doing. Sharon asked a question about gifts with your logo on stuff, mugs and things like that. I think those kinds of things are fine sometimes. I think they can be nice gestures. And that being said, I think they're most appropriate when you are hosting something or attending a conference or something like that, right? So the logoed gifts I find are most valuable when you are sending them or when you're using them in mass quantities, right? So when you're trying to give a host gift for an event that you've hosted, a reception or a cocktail party or something like that, or when you are trying to do a bag drop at a conference that you're sponsoring or something like that, then absolutely the logoed mug or the travel thing or the disposable or the what was it that I saw recently? The metal straws, the stainless steel straws, because we're trying not to do single-use plastic, all of those kinds of things. I think all those kinds of logoed things are good for when you're giving gifts en masse. My recommendation, though, is that when you are making personal expressions of gratitude to a client, to a referral source, something like that, that again, you stay away from kind of the logoed stuff that you might send to anyone and send them something that's personally meaningful to them. I think you can do that still in a cost-effective way, right? It doesn't have to be the most expensive bottle of wine, but you can do it in a way that's personally meaningful. And usually that logoed stuff doesn't tend to be personally meaningful. Okay, I want to get back to this. So the core 4 for preparation. This is one thing. This is a tool that I encourage my clients to use, particularly when it comes to event-based business development opportunities. So for example, if you are attending a conference, either in person or virtually, if you're hosting something, again, in person or virtually, if you're picking up the phone and calling a client or a referral source, one of the things that I want you to do is be well prepared going into that. I see a lot of lawyers wing it at marketing and business development, and winging it at marketing and business development. It's not that you have 0 results. It's just that you have winging it types of results, right? So if you want better than winging it types of results, don't wing it. And here's an easy way to not wing it. So number 1, I want you to think about, what is my objective, right? What am I trying to accomplish here? Where am I going? Who's going to be there? What do I want to accomplish with this, right? Again, going back to that target market analysis. Do I want to learn? Do I want to be seen? Do I want to contribute in terms of thought leadership? Do I want to connect with people? Thinking through, what is the purpose of this activity? I know the long-term purpose is get more business, but what's the short-term purpose? Am I trying to meet new people? Am I trying to reconnect with people? Am I trying to expand my my visibility within a particular audience? Those kinds of things. Then with that, I want you to think through both key messages. What am I trying to communicate to that audience? As well as discovery questions. What am I trying to learn? What do I want to know? And then ultimately, the last thing that I want you to think about is, what are the likely outcomes, and how will I set a definitive next steps? And this is where we're going to transition into follow-up, which is going to be the last part of my presentation today. So one of the most important things about marketing and business development, it really is, it's the bookends, gang, right? So one of the things I told you is super important about marketing and business development is that front end part of, is this going to get me in front of my target audience, right? And we talked a little bit about how making sure that you are in fact getting in front of the right target audience is going to waste you a bunch of time and energy and resources going places and doing things that don't get you in front of the kinds of people who can create business opportunity for you. So if you're looking for a way to be efficient with your marketing and business development resources, dollars, time, energy, all of those kinds of things, which I suspect all of you are, one of the big things that you can do is on that front end, ask yourself the question, who is this going to get me in front of the right audience? On the other end of the bookend, the other thing that I want you to pay attention to is the back end, which is the follow through, right? It's that follow through on the golf swing. It's that follow through on the baseball swing, whatever you want to call it. I see far too many lawyers invest in marketing and business development activities and think of it as, well, I wrote the article, I'm done now, right? Or I gave the presentation, I'm done now. I attended the conference, I'm done now. And yet, how many of you have actually ever published an article or given a single presentation or attended a single networking event and then had your phone, again, ringing off the hook with people who thought that you were so charming and brilliant that they have to have you as their outside counsel. It just doesn't work like that, right? You got to go back to this idea of people hire you because they know you and they like you and they trust you. So one of the big things that you've got to do is really think about, how do I follow through on my marketing and business development activities in a way that gets me that next step with people, that definitive next step with people. And that's, I suspect it will make some sense to many of you in the context of, let's say, networking events or conferences and things like that, right? When you go to a networking event and you meet someone interesting, a potential client or referral source or something like that. How many of you have been at something like that, met someone interesting and said, oh man, this is great. Let's exchange business cards. We should absolutely follow up. Only to come back to your office and have 6 or 12 or 18 months go by and the following up never happened because you got back to your office and you were buried with email and work that you had to catch up with now. And now you wasted that opportunity, right? Be honest with me. How many of you guys have done that? All of us do that. We often do. I teach this stuff and I do it, right? Because I get busy and I come back to my computer and there's 1,000 emails waiting for me and I got a gajillion deliverables I got to get back to my clients. But the reality is, if you're not going to do the follow-up, you shouldn't do the marketing or the business development in the first place because it's not worth it. You're wasting your time. It's like lighting money on fire. So my recommendation to you would be, rather than doing more marketing and business development efforts and then doing less follow-up because you don't have the time to do it, I would actually recommend do less marketing and business development activities and make sure that you have the time for the follow-up. Because frankly, if you're not doing the follow-up, you're not going to get the ROI that you're looking for. So one of the things that I want you to be thinking about is, for example, if you go to a conference or a networking event, God willing, someday we will get back to those in person, even if you're doing them virtually. One of the things that I want you to be thinking about is, okay, you met that person who was interesting and you're inclined to exchange business cards with them, say, yeah, this is great, we should follow up. Instead of going back to your office and either leaving that business card on your desk and having it look at you and make you feel guilty, what about saying to that person in the moment, wow, gosh, Phil, it was really great to connect with you. I enjoyed getting to know you and I'd love to get to know you better. Would you be up for a phone call, a Zoom meeting? If we get back to it, right? Coffee, lunch, whatever it might be. Find that way to follow up with the person and invite them to something. The other thing though that I want you to keep in mind, that makes a ton of sense in the context of in person, right? Meeting someone at a conference or a networking event or something like that. But I also want you to think about it when it comes to presentations and articles and things like that. So for example, when you give a presentation, right? Largely we think, okay, I showed up, I gave the presentation. Hopefully people asked me questions. Maybe somebody saw me speak and will call me afterwards. I gave out the materials, whatever it might be. One of the things that I want you all to consider is, can you, for example, build into your presentation something along the lines of, and I have I've got a resource guide related to the content of the presentation, but that's not part of the materials. So if you're interested in, a brand protection checklist, I've got a brand protection checklist. That's not part of the materials, but if you're interested in this, please let me know. Either drop off a business card with me, put your email address in the chat, or send me an email, and I'd be happy to share that brand protection checklist with you, right? That now allows people who had an interest in your presentation to raise their hand and say, hey, I really liked what you had to say, and I want to know more. That way, once they do raise their hand, they give you a business card, they drop their email in the chat, they send you an email. You've got the ability to follow up and say, hey, I'm so glad you enjoyed the presentation. Here's the materials. Here's also that checklist I mentioned. And by the way, would it be helpful for us to get on the phone for 15 or 30 minutes and talk about how you guys are navigating these issues and whether I've got perspective that might be valuable to you? Those kinds of things. So Phil is asking the good question of what are some examples of definitive next steps, and here's a few different categories of definitive next steps that you can use. We call them the 3 ins. So one is invitations. So invitations, one of the things that you can do to follow up with someone is invite them to stuff, right? You can invite them to an interaction with you. Right now, that's most likely to be coffee or Zoom or something like that. God willing, in the future, it'll also be coffee or lunch or things like that. So one of the things that you can do is invite them to an interaction with you. Another thing that you can do, though, is invite them to something that your firm is hosting, right? To say, hey, we're hosting a webinar on XYZ topic, or we're having a social event at this thing, and all of those kinds of things. So one of the things to be thinking about is not just ways to invite someone to an interaction with you, but maybe invite people to things that your firm is hosting. And then a third thing to be thinking about is, can you invite them to something outside of the firm and you, right? So are you attending a networking event or a professional conference or something like that that person might be interested in? Or are you a part of a charitable organization or a bar association that person might be interested in attending their annual gala or event or something like that? So you've got three kinds of invitations: invitations to an interaction with me, invitations to something at my firm, or invitations to something outside or me and my firm that the other person might be interested in. So that's one set of definitive next steps, is the of invitations. A second set of definitive next steps is the of introduction. So one of the things that we can do is introduce people that we meet to other people in our network, right? So for example, say that you meet a potential client or referral source who is encountering an issue that one of your clients has just navigated their way through. One of the things that you can do is, hey, I've got a client who just thought through and did this same thing that you're talking about. Would it be valuable for me to connect you with them? Maybe you would find some interest in swapping notes with them and figuring out how they navigated the same issue that you're trying to navigate. Or it might be based on personal interest or geography. Man, I can't believe you're an avid ice hockey player. I've got a business partner who's a avid ice hockey player as well. You guys should really meet. Maybe you would have an interest in participating in her ice hockey league or whatever it might be, right? So thinking about, and this I will tell you, some of the best rainmakers that I have seen are always thinking about, how can I connect someone that I've met with someone who I already know in ways that they would find valuable. So that's a second way to follow up with people, is to introduce them to other people in your network that they would find value in knowing. And then the third way to follow up with people is by either sharing or seeking insights. So the of insights, on the one hand, is offering insights on a topic that someone might be interested in, right? To say, hey, it was really great meeting you, and here's that article that I mentioned on XYZ trademark issue. Or, hey, it was really great meeting you, and it was great to talk to you about your upcoming vacation to Portland, Maine. Here's my restaurant recommendations. I vacation in Portland, Maine every summer, or whatever it might be. So offering insights, offering information is one way that you can follow up with people. Another way that you can follow up with people, though, is seeking their insights. So one of the things that you might say is, hey, I'd love to pick your brain. I'm writing an article on this new development in trademark law, and I'm just trying to get my arms around how other fashion companies are thinking about this issue. Would you be okay if I picked your brain for 15 minutes on how you guys are navigating this issue so I can put some practical insights into my article? Or, hey, I'm giving a presentation at a conference in a couple of months on XYZ trademark issue, and I'd love to get your insights on kind of how you think that issue is going to evolve and how you think it's going to affect trademark protection for companies like you. Could I pick your brain so that I can put some real world insights into my presentation? Those kinds of ways to seek insight, even if it's just, hey, I'm trying to keep my finger on the pulse of how this issue is affecting companies like yours. Could I get your thoughts on it? I'd love to hear what you guys are thinking or how you guys are handling it. That's also a great way to connect with people. So now you've got three buckets of different kinds of ways to follow up with people. Invitations, right? You can invite them to something with you, to something at the firm, to something outside of the firm. Introductions, you can take people that you're meeting and introduce them to other people in your network who they would find value in knowing. Or insights, you can offer them insights, right? Here's something that I thought you would like to know, or that you would find valuable. Or, hey, can you share your perspective with me? Generally, that, hey, can you share your perspective with me, is really well received, because by and large, people are flattered when you want to know their perspective, when you want to get their insights. Most of us love talking about what we know, right? So asking for insights can be a great way to follow up. All right, I promise you all that I am starting to land the plane. I know this has been a lot of conversation about marketing, and I hope it has been valuable to you. one of the things that I want you all to be thinking about when it comes to these kinds of marketing and business development efforts is what gets measured gets done, right? So one of the things that I think is really important to do when it comes to our marketing and business development initiatives is actually to track what did we get out of it, and how are we going to follow up. So when it comes to actual follow-ups, one of the things that I would encourage you all to do, whether you do this, and people talked about Acuity or Calendly, there's also some really great personal or firm CRM systems. So there's the big ones like Interaction. CRM stands for Customer Relations Management. It's basically a contact management system. So you can use some of the big ones like Interaction, but then there's some smaller ones. One of the ones that I heard that one of my clients had good success with recently, Contactually is a great one. You can also, Chris Fish talked about CRMs on Monday. Thank you, Stacy. So Chris would be an awesome expert for you all to consult about using systems like this. But to the extent that you all, one of the things, right, I made a big deal about doing the follow-up on business development efforts. And so one of the things that's important to do is actually to keep track of that. Because again, when I think about the most successful rainmakers I've seen, they don't just do it off the top of their head. They don't wing it. They put as much discipline and rigor around business development and marketing as they do on about anything else that's happening in their firm or in their practice. And so one of the things that I want you all to be thinking about is how do you actually put some discipline and rigor in terms of things like tracking follow-up. So for example, when you give that presentation or go to that conference or whatever it is, how do you make sure that the people that you met or the people that you interacted with, that you're actually following up with them? Not just once, right, after the event or after your presentation or whatever it might be, but then 2 months down the line or 6 months down the line and all of those kinds of things. Because as you all know, one of the things that's important about marketing and business development is you don't want to just have one interaction with someone. That's not going to get you hired, right? In fact, the data shows that it takes 7 to 14 touches with a potential client for them to actually start considering working with you. Bree, it looks like you're about to give us our code.
Yes. As a reminder, we are not offering CLE credit for this session, but we will provide you with a uniform certificate of attendance in case your state will let you get credit, because obviously you'll have learned a ton. So maybe you can get credit in your state, even if you can't in the state of California. Our code is the number 4, the word market, the number 1. That is 4, market, 1. All right, continue, Tasneem.
Awesome, fantastic. Thanks, Bree. So one of the things that I want you all to think about is whether you use it, whether you use a CRM system like Contactually or Interaction or some other system, or you keep a simple spreadsheet or a Word document or whatever it might be, or in your Outlook contacts. One of the things that I want you all to be thinking about is not only how do you do that first touch point after you've met someone, but how do you continue to interact with them over time in ways that keep you connected with them and allow you to build their relationship that ultimately is going to lead to business opportunity. As I mentioned, most of the data shows that it takes between 7 and 14 touches to actually get business from a potential new client. What's really interesting, though, is while it takes 7 to 14 touches to get new business from a client, most sellers, and this is not just lawyers, I'm talking about now professional salespeople, people who sell software or insurance or you name it, most salespeople will, if after the first interaction with a prospective client, almost, I think the data shows something like 50% won't follow up if there isn't a business opportunity after that first interaction. After the second interaction, another 80% fall off. So if you just hang in there for the third interaction, you're already outdoing most of the competition, right? So one of the things that I want you all to be thinking about when it comes to tracking follow-up is not just how do you make that one interaction with someone, but really how do you make those multiple interactions with people over time that get you known, liked, and trusted in ways that actually have people wanting to do business with you. So ultimately, right, the thing that I recommend to my clients is at a minimum, you probably want to, for your sort of lower priority prospects or connectors, you probably want to have 1 to 2 interactions with people a year. For your higher priority prospects and connectors, I would recommend, and this includes existing clients, I would recommend at least 3 to 4 interactions, if not more, a year. Typically, I find that staying in touch with someone at least quarterly is enough to keep the relationship active and fresh. But you got to hit that at least target, right? So for your highest priority clients, prospects, connectors, referral sources, I would recommend at least being in some kind of interaction with them once quarterly. Now, not all of those have to be lunch or coffee. It might be lunch or coffee. It might be seeing them at an event. It might be just exchanging emails or text messages with them. It might be going old school and picking up the phone and calling them. But having that 3 to 4 interactions a year to keep that relationship fresh is the kind of relationship building that's ultimately going to get you business opportunity. All right, the very last thing that I want to talk about, and this is where I'm going to end, is I know many of us want to know, right? It was built into the title. Where's the ROI for our business development opportunities and our marketing investments? And one of the things that I find is that most lawyers and law firms think about measuring ROI just in terms of, did we get new clients? Did we get new matters? Did we get new revenue in the door? And the reality is that most marketing and business development efforts aren't that close to the revenue, right? It takes time for those things to ultimately come to fruition, right? Again, it's not like you place an advertisement or publish an article or give a presentation and all of a sudden people are asking for engagement letters. By and large, when you invest in those kinds of things, what you're looking for, did we meet new people in our target markets? Did we reconnect with people who we knew previously but now had a new reason to interact with them? Did we advance the relationship so that we actually started talking to them about their outside counsel and whether we can be helpful to them? All of those kinds of things. So one of the things that I would recommend is, as you're thinking about measuring, the ROI from your marketing and business development efforts, is that you think about measuring some of these things, right? You'll see here reconnections, new relationships, advances in relationships, definitive next steps, new business opportunities, a pitch opportunity, all of those kinds of things. If you measure those kinds of things along the way, I suspect over time you will see that the new business comes in the door. It's kind of the difference, we call it the difference between measuring leading indicators of success versus lagging indicators of success. Revenue, new clients, new matters, new revenue, that's a lagging indicator of success. You have to do all of the right things in marketing and business development, and then the very last thing that you will see is new revenue. Whereas leading indicators of success are meeting new people in your target market, reconnecting with the right kinds of people, advancing relationships with prospective clients or connectors. When you see those kinds of leading indicators of success, you will know that you are on the right track and that revenue will follow. So I would encourage you all, I'm not saying that measuring revenue isn't important. It is absolutely important, but I want you to measure kind of both of those things, right? Measure the leading indicators as well as the lagging indicators so that you know that your efforts are showing the return on investment that you want them to. All right, gang. So that is what I have for you all today. I hope that you have found this valuable. I know I'm a few minutes early. If you have additional questions, please enter them in the chat. But also, please know that I'm happy to take your questions or talk with you further about these things if you are interested. So I have put my contact information here in the materials. If you want further guidance on this, have further questions, would like to talk about this more, please reach out to me. I love what I do and I love helping lawyers and law firms be successful in growing their practices. So I would be absolutely delighted to talk to you about these things. And also, I saw in the chat that that there was conversation about an alt legal group trip to Portland, Maine. I said Portland, Maine, because I just got back from there. I was there this past weekend for a long weekend, and it was amazing. You guys should absolutely go to Portland, Maine. If you go, you should eat lots of oysters and lobster. My recommendations would be Honey Paw, Eventide, and Duck Fat. Those are my top 3 restaurant picks in Portland, Maine. So anyway, I hope you all found this presentation valuable. I have so enjoyed being with you, and I've enjoyed the conversation in the chat. So thank you for that. I hope you have a great rest of your few hours of the conference, and that it's a great success. And I hope that I will hear from some of you.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so very much, Tasneem. We do have her contact information up here on the slide, so you can add her as a contact, ask her the questions that you have, reach out to her. She's an incredibly great resource for you. Thank you a ton, Tasneem, for this presentation. I
My
think the
pleasure.
entire audience really learned a ton about marketing and ROI and follow-up and all of the things. So thanks a ton. We do have one more full session right after this. You'll have about 11 minutes. I will see you at 1:45 for In High Demand, crafting effective and creative demand letters. This should be a lot of fun. So take a quick break. I will see you in about 10 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, it looks like